Morning all. I had an interesting game last night in Herts League against John Sharp. He kicked off with E4. Game was played at Barnet, home advantage. So anyway, I played what I thought I should, which was the French defence E6. I'm not sure if this was a kind of mistake. Maybe I should have a bit of variety in my opening repertoire. But anyway, he seemed to sort of he said he'd sort of similar position earlier in the season actually than the variation played in this game. So after d5 he plays the Tarrasch French knight d2. So I played bishop e7, which generally I've had very good results in, although sometimes I've had dodgy positions, but somehow luck's generally been on my side in this variation. So he plays bishop d3. He's not deploying yet the knight to f3, so he's not blocking in his f pawn yet. And here already I don't think I'm really that alert. Well, I wasn't that alert to subtleties here. I think a key move in this position is to avoid the possibility of Queen G4. And you might think this isn't a big deal. Maybe it doesn't look like a big deal, the possibility of Queen G4, and it wouldn't be kind of that effective in this position. Say, well, let's check Queen G4 here and its effectiveness. I mean, let's say Queen G4 was outrageously played here, then knight f6, and this could be a gambit with counterplay for black. So it's not effective in that position, but you do get Queen G4 as an idea in the French winnower. And the knight, one advantage of the knight, in fact it should be labelled as two advantages, that are not only blocking the f pawn from f4, f5 with this waiting move, but also to block the queen is critical from G4, because if black is forced, for example, to defend by castling kingside, that's already a big kind of commitment for king's safety. So bishop d3 is quite a cunning waiting move in that respect, that it's not moving that knight yet. And I wasn't that, as I say, alert about the danger associated with bishop d3. So as a cunning waiting move, I think it's got a lot of merit. And it's important, perhaps, here to ensure that, okay, knight f3 might be played or it might not, because Queen G4, at the moment, there's an effective answer with knight f6 and rook g8. But if the knight's here, then Queen G4 is going to be more effective. So in order to try and encourage knight f3, I think c5 is quite critical here. Sorry, I've got an engine here, so say c5. Say white tries to suspend the possibility of Queen G4, so say c3, I think knight c6, and it starts to get difficult now to suspend the possibility of Queen G4s in this position. I mean, let's say knight e2, then that queen is now blocked. And in fact, say this kind of position, maybe even d takes e4 is possible. This should be okay for black. So knight f6, this is a solid position without the Queen G4 issues. There's an isolated queen's pawn to play on. This might be okay for black, rather. I'll venture. So that just shows c5 creates maybe the positional threat of giving white an isolated queen's pawn, and that is the most common played move in this situation with bishop e7. Really previously I think I just considered the idea is to try and prompt the blocking of the f pawn, but actually this is actually maybe just of equal importance as a threat, and it was echoed actually in one of the previous Hearts League games I had as black in French against Swanson, who's like over 200, and I drew that game with a comfortable position at the end, but there was a possibility mentioned of Queen G4 there. It's either going to create, you know, some more dark square weaknesses, or it's going to commit the black king safety. That's why I don't think it can be overemphasized as a key idea. So I went wrong, actually. I didn't play c5, and I've given the opponent now a terribly dangerous free hand on the king side. And there's a kind of pattern of, in all this, of overprotection of e5, a central point e5, as well as the commitment of black king safety here. If black can control e5 and reinforce at e5 and the black kings on the king side, it's a recipe for total disaster. Okay, so after knight f6, unfortunately, white can now play e5, and I hope you're going to guess the problem once this board shows. If we get the board to show, so without the computer hanging, we'll press stop here. Right, so the problem anyway, knight f6, e5, so queen g4 here, and white is sort of better here. Although castles is given as like one of the better moves, it is committing king safety. This really is already a problematic position because of what's been described. It's in the winner, this is a dangerous idea, but here there's no counterplay, it seems, on the queen side. If I'm forced to castle now, or g6 looks just as miserable, weakening squares, but castling in the circumstances, maybe g6. g5 has also been punted in this position in one game, but it's a miserable position after castles. White does kind of have a free hand on the king side now. He plays h4, and probably we were looking at post-mortem the idea of playing not f5, which is what I played, but actually f6, maybe to just try and open up the position. If we just briefly check out f6 here, possibly, you know, it's going to be a bit more difficult for white to play this position, but it does have threats like threatening mate, maybe going back, taking on d5. But this kind of position, at least there's some more active play from black available here, trying to keep the h file closed, and there's the prospect of having a game, you know, with counterplay in this position. So if I did have this game, you know, position again, this would be is actually rook f5 a resource here? That's interesting. Rook f5 is given as a resource here. So what's going on after rook f5? Say takes knight d e5. I think that's trapping the queen. So that's interesting. So this does offer the prospect of interesting play then, if resources like that are available. It's more tactical. The game is definitely of a more tactical character. So f6 is definitely an idea worth trying to destroy white's centre, even if it loses a pawn with check and loses d5 later. That's an energetic idea we had mentioned. But after the move played f5, white's definitely going back to having a free hand now without too much interruption. One of the ideas of this expression, I think it's a general expression in war, not just in chess. So if chess is like a war game, if an opponent's given a free hand, they're given a freedom to sort of attack without any kind of consequence. Now here, with the e5 being the centre being quite strong now, because there's no f6, it's been removed by f5. So another sort of strategic blunder really. Not only the king on the wrong side of the board, but the potential, you know, for white to just have a free hand on the king side is great here, just to get a menacing attack later. The counterplay in inverted commas against the centre isn't that great to distract white from attacking intentions in this position. You might think well, has there been some rule-breaking moves with the queen, pesky queen, going here and then? Yeah, well, it has provoked the commitment of king safety and locking down the centre by f5 without f6s. This centre is now in a securer state as well. So anyway, I still try and attack the centre, but it doesn't really do much after knight e2. A possibility which we both sort of checked out was the idea of at least playing for knight b4. I'm not really sure knight b4 is that significant, but let's give it a whirl. So say knight b4 here. So apparently bishop b1, and I was actually recommending knight c3, but I think, is there a problem with knight c3? b5 apparently. b5. Well, there's knight going back. Okay, this kind of position I hadn't really checked out that much, but I thought in post-mortem knight c4 was good. But let's imagine white castles. Knight c6, knight e2, bishop a6. It still seems white's better here anyway, technically. So this doesn't look like the most scary plan in the world, even if knight b4 was played. But I played queen b6, which really leads to nothing. I was excited a bit by this prospect of a check here to keep the king, to prompt bishop d2, but of course white now plays king f1. So basically, if we evaluate this position here, we have a centrally intact centre with a kind of echoes of overprotection of e5 possible. A free hand on the king side with h4 actually meaning that the rook can potentially come back into the game later. The queen could be dangerous on the h file anyway. Imagine h5, knight f4, g4s later. The bishop and queen are pointing menacingly at the black king, which shouldn't be on this side of the board. So I didn't like the state of affairs here. My queen's now also blocking in the b pawn. This is going to take ages to develop the bishop. There's some development issues with this knight and this bad bishop. Unless I want to play a move like knight b8, bishop d7 to b5, it all seems a bit slow in this position. So I thought actually my position was already looking a bit poor. If we look at a slower alternative actually, like knight b8 here, let's see if white can just smash through. Say a3, bishop e7. Let's give b4 as well, just so a5 is b5, locking down the queen side. This shows the beauty, I think, of white's position. There's a free hand being demonstrated here on the king side, and the centre is nicely intact. There's congestion issues of the black pieces here. Now the queen coming here, it looks fairly gruesome. Queen g6, looks as though g4 might be on the cards. Knight f4, there might be something up with g4. It's good. Bishop e8 traps the queen. Okay, so okay, something to be avoided. Knight h4, and you see white's evaluation is going up finally now. White has this free hand on the king side, but to actually exploit it, let's go a bit further. Let's see what would be suggested. Bishop h6. It's starting to look pretty nasty if that was on the cards. So there's a build up here which really there's no resources around to defend the king if white can intensify the pressure. So I did find this a desperate situation in principle anyway, and I played this move knowing that maybe the game's lost now. I played knight takes d4 to try and smash white's centre. And okay, so he takes and I take on e5, so I'm getting 2 pawns for the knight. He offers now the exchange of queens, which is very good. And really technically I just thought this was lost anyway here already, because I thought he could just take and just support the knight. And now if I give up this bishop, he's just an extra bishop up, and I didn't see much going on. But actually he retained the queens to my delight, actually, as though maybe I've got a chance. I can try and liberate this bishop. If I can get in e5, I'll be liberating the bishop. So f4 first to avoid f4s from white, h5, and now I attack this knight. And here's another annoying phase of the game now at move 19. I was hoping just for simply knight f3, and after queen f6 I didn't think it would be looking as bad as before. So say knight f3, queen f6, I thought maybe the position was getting a bit easier to play, but the engine's like white anyway here with bishop c2. If bishop c2 is dangerous, maybe it's lining up. But say e5, okay. Queen d3 apparently just hits anyway. So bishop, that's why perhaps bishop c2 is simple and strong. If that's not practical, this kind of idea of playing for e5, then there's trouble with the black king still on the king side. But imagine bishop c2 wasn't bound, then there might be a chance with e5. But the opponent actually played, John played knight g6, which I was delighted at. I thought really I was in for a chance now, because I thought, you know, this attack, if I did take, is reliant on like rook h8 and then takes, then queen h5 mating. But I thought, hang on, I can take and then just play f3, where's the attack? So I took, and I thought, well, surely I just play f3 here, I'm not that dangerously placed. He takes, and of course I don't want f4 with a repetition of this rook h8 check. So I was fairly optimistic at this point in the game at move 21. So I clamped down on f4 by playing bishop f4, and now a very strong move indeed, I think, was played. One of the best moves in the position, bishop e3. Bishop e3. And it starts to get a bit tricky here, basically. I'm not sure a move like takes and rook f3 is working, which is something I briefly checked. If bishop takes, rook takes f3, I'm not sure this works. He just takes, and he's got threats now, queen f7 as well. So say king e1. This is probably my best chance, actually. I should have maybe checked this out better. Queen g6, and actually this probably was my best chance in this position. If king f2, check, and taking that, this is definitely better than the game continuation anyway. This idea of the rook sack here. Oh there. So bishop e3, I meekly played queen f6. And apparently he misses his first major shots. He plays maybe the second best move in the position there, which seems an incredibly powerful idea anyway. But the move order maybe could be improved here. If he just takes and plays now rook h5, where else on the h file can the rook go to support king g2 and rook, the other rook coming to h1 to mate me like this? Nowhere else. This is an incredibly powerful idea. If I take here, then he can get this with tempo. Maybe not king g2, there's a problem with king g2, rook takes d3, clearly. So king e2 protecting the bishop, and now the other rook's going to join forces. And this is pretty nasty stuff. Say this variation. And this pawn is going to be a bit of a menace in this variation anyway. Clear advantage to white. But okay, so I've missed also a shot here of maybe of what we saw of bishop takes followed by rook takes f3. If queen takes e3, I don't think that's particularly well. That's a little bit like the game actually. So let's go back to the game. Bishop f4, bishop e3. I played queen f6. he plays rook h5, which is an incredibly powerful idea of king g2 and rook h1. This piece is still a bit of a problem piece. Don't want to give white too much time, so I did take on e3. Now, key to consider is e5 if this is going to work. And we're having some fun in post-mortem actually. Maybe king g2. We were looking at this e4, and now actually apparently this is going to be okay for black. If takes here, there's queen takes g6, that's brilliant for black. So this does look like a promising continuation as well, this e5. So strongest apparently here is bishop takes f4. So say if e takes, now there's king g2 again with that horrible idea. Otherwise, I think white would be in trouble with king g2. Technically, yeah, it does seem as though e4, although in post-mortem we were as though this diagonal was dangerous, and it doesn't look particularly dangerous here. So this is attacking this pawn by blocking in the bishop temporarily, and then the rook would also be loose. So actually, let's just take that a little bit further, this position. Here, bishop g4, that's looking great for black. Okay, so but apparently bishop takes f4 here, and if queen takes f4, again this king g2 idea, it protects actually f3 as well, and this is pretty nasty stuff. It's horrible. It's absolutely slaughter time for the black king there. So say rook f5, that looks pretty desperate to lose the exchange like that, and maybe either rook moving the rook or queen e3 even. So let's go back. So in the game I actually decided anyway, didn't see many of those variations, but I decided to play bishop takes e3, and we get a similarly horrible position now after exchange of queens. And I have this idea, you see, that I'm going to answer a rook h1 with king f8 and cheekily get my king out and play bishop d7, and I'll be as safe as houses. The problem is this is a very bad position here. After king e2 I play rook g3, which might not be the strongest move at all. In fact, if I want to play my idea, apparently rook f6 here, the king crawling out is still an advantage for white. If I'm losing g7, quite a big advantage maybe, but that should be enough to win anyway. Technically rook e7, this bishop's hemmed in, the rook's hemmed in, it's horrible. So but anyway, I play an inferior move. I play rook. It's a bit of a desperate position anyway. So rook g3, and he plays a brilliant, absolutely brilliant move. Instead of this rook h1, superb move, rook f1. There's a key threat of rook h8 here, takes, and then rook f8 mating. So that really forces me to play bishop d7, and I'll end up. And I thought this was it. I really thought this was it. So I throw in a check first anyway, which turns out to be quite handy with the king on the first rank. And now bishop d7, and I was simply expecting the game to be finished with rook h1, because not only is the threat of mate, it's a threat of winning the rook. So rook f1 had prompted bishop d7, opening up the rook to this attack, and I thought this was the idea. I was very impressed with it, but my opponent went a little bit wrong here. So rook h1 is just winning on the spot. If we have a look at this, it's winning the rook, just winning the rook. There's nothing there for black, but he let me off the hook a little bit. He played rook f7, and apparently now it's about equal. I play a move to threaten mate. King d1. But again here it's difficult for black now. I go wrong, but it is a difficult position. In fact, the advantage has crawled up a little bit. So apparently the best move now is to positively invite rook h7, which seems not a very nice prospect anyway. Apparently the engine move here is bishop c6. Is there really a hope after rook h7? Possibly d4 now, and there's ideas of bishop f3, and this is not something I'd seen. So if the black king is not getting mated, maybe there's a little bit of hope in this position. What does white do here against what is the threat? Is it bishop f3? Let's give white a move like e4. Rook takes g6, that would block in g6, so that would be okay. E takes d4. Rook takes b2 apparently. So f3 is covered by that rook anyway. Bishop c4. There's bishop f3 check, and taking on c4 is even possible apparently. So here, this is at least trickier than the game continuation. Actually, rook takes b2 now means bishop a4 is on the cards, and this rook's free to come in without b3 being playable. So that's why I think it's become about equal after bishop c6 all of a sudden. So I missed my chance actually. I didn't see bishop c6 and the ramifications of that. But it looks pretty, scary to invite rook h7. So I thought the position was fairly desperate, and I play a move which hastens to the end, e5. So just offering a bishop for not much, just to get rid of this horrible pawn. So apparently, yes, the final major resource is to actually invite both rooks to the 7th rank in this variation, positively invite them with bishop c6. An amazing resource. So I think we can draw the conclusion engines are very slippery, even if the king's under severe danger. Bishop c6 is a very slippery move indeed. But I played e5, just offering a piece for a bit of peace actually to get rid of this. But it's a bishop up now for white. I do take there. He's threatening now for a clearer endgame, and it's going to be a journal adjudicated on the long time control in the Herts League, so I thought best not to allow that. So I move my king now to avoid a pair of rooks coming off. And now rook d4. I thought my final chance might be to double rooks on e2. This is met very well now. King c3. Rook d2, and it looks as though rook e1 might give me a chance to win another pawn, but the beautiful final move of the game was played now. Engine top choice, bishop d3. So there's not any threatening bishop takes e4, check. He's attacking the rook. If rook c1, there's choices like rook c2. It's hopeless for black here in this position, in this final position. If you look at it, if takes, there's rook takes f2. If rook c1, there's rook c2. Well, let's just engine check just to make sure after bishop d3. I think it's +5 when I earlier checked it. Rook c1, it's about +5 this position. Bishop c2. I think rook c2, of course. So that's a beautiful kind of move, bishop d3, very strong move, and the final surprise. So bishop d3. Let's try and stop this. I think computer's crashed again. When that stops. So a beautifully played game, a few errors from white, but otherwise a fantastic concept of queen g4. So when I play this variation again, and I think, or I might say in Blitz videos about bishop e7, one of the major points of this waiting move is to encourage knight f3. Actually, another major point is try and not play knight f6 until queen g4 is ruled out. Queen g4 has a lot of advantages to it. Keeps the king potentially on the king side, queen lurking about dangerously on the king side, and that's pretty bad. Usually I want to castle queen side. A lot of my wins from castling queen side, even when I've somehow mucked up the central tension, there's always more hope if your king's not always subject to onslaught on the king side, with white having a free hand. So it's the combination of the free hand on the king side and the king being on the king side, which is a recipe for a major disaster. But that's why here, from the evidence of this game, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this as a key theoretical move here, but it seems c5 ticks the boxes of making sure queen g4 isn't too harmful here, because there's always knight f6 and rook g8 as a pawn sack here. So after c5, say here, queen g4 actually crumbles the centre as well. There's pressure on d4. I don't think queen g4 is at all playable here. Could be wrong. I think invite is okay. Okay, so rook g6. There's enough play here for black. In fact, rook takes g2. And again, actually, it's an interesting position though. It seems as though, well, it's more active. Black king can still potentially go to the queen side here, maybe knight f8 later. The interesting thing about that though is the harmlessness of c takes d4 in all this. I would have thought c takes d4 would have been useful at some point, like here in this variation. But no, e5 is still dangerous here. Taking, that's why black's got to be careful. It's like a winnower dangers. White has an advantage here. There's definitely overprotection of e5 coming up. There's still a bind on the position past h pawn, so that's tricky as well. So it's a narrow path black faces here, but c5 is the most promising move, I think. And often white will play d takes and it's a different game. But here, yeah, I give white a free hand, unfortunately. So I hope maybe you guys learn, boys and girls, learn from this mistake. That queen g4 is very dangerous in this kind of position if you're going to play the French defence for various reasons. h4, you know, very attacking move. Anyway, let's close that to get a bigger board. And the game after f5, f6 was much more promising to try and blast open the centre at the cost of maybe 1 or 2 pawns even, better than sacrificing a piece later to blast open the centre. That's a lot more desperate. The bishop b4 check idea doesn't have to play bishop d2, otherwise his king would be in danger if he has to take. He'd be losing b2, etc., or losing d4. No, he just plays king f1. So it's great position for white, great attacking position. So I get a bit desperate to play this to get the centre opened up. He kept the queens on, and the other possibility not mentioned actually is rook e8. We had a quick check of rook e8 as though that might have been something interesting. Apparently here, okay, knight takes f4 is playable. Similar to this. Post-mortem, someone was mentioning rook h4, and this is better for white. So g3, this is actually crushing this position technically. Either g takes or even stronger, apparently bishop c2, just keeping that pin and then taking. So that's pretty nasty stuff as well, although more complex it seems than the game continuation. At least I'm getting a freer seemingly position, but I'm a piece down. But so that's pretty nifty. If I hadn't taken the knight, there's still a problem here with knight takes f4. That's a great move. Or apparently knight h4 anyway. If he has second thoughts, that's still okay for white. But knight takes f4 is even better for rook h4. And if bishop d7 g3, again, knight's brilliant on f4 here. So that was another one. So basically I helped weave this mating net by taking the knight, which I didn't really see. Bit of a subtle mating net on the cards here. If we look at this with knight g6, I didn't really see the danger. I thought there's a refutation in f3. I didn't really see the problem. But here it does seem as though I miss a major chance of a rook sack to get this g6 pawn off. That would be much more interesting than the game continuation. So taking and then rook takes f3 is probably my best chance, absolute best chance. If king e1, rook e3, if king g2, queen g4, mating white actually. So this was a missed shot as well. Okay, it wasn't my best performance. So in this position, I think Engine would say this is equal or better for black. No, in fact, what's happened here? Bishop takes e3, f takes, rook takes, check, king e1, queen takes g6. In this position, queen h3. Even in this position, this is better for white. Even losing g6. Oh dear. So if bishop d7 back to losing a rook, am I? Well, no. First, these checks have to be sorted out. Okay. Well, that's more complicated in the game anyway. That there's potential for a little bit more counterplay than the game, but still, apparently, it's better for white even here. So even though I missed that shot, okay, it's still better for white. So I go downhill though more rapidly than queen f6, one could say. So he plays one of the most incisive moves in the position. The most incisive is to take first on f4, but he actually plays rook h5, and now it really goes downhill. This position, I'm just faced with this slow mating net possibility. So he could have just forcibly, after this brilliant move rook f1, which threatens rook h8 and rook f8 mating, he could have just forcibly now won an entire rook in this position simply by rook h1, because now the rook's free to be taken with rook h8 and rook takes a8. My king has to try and escape, and there would have been rook h1. But he slips up a little, and now an engine defense move. Here is bishop c6, as we saw coming up. Sorry, rook c1 first to threaten mate, and now bishop c6 only move apparently. But I didn't want to invite this doubling of rooks, and went down a piece, of course, which is losing clearly. But anyway, an exciting game and well played from the opponent. Final move very nice as well, bishop d3. If takes, attacking the rook, and then bishop e4, just bishop e4 and then taking the rook, easy stuff, it's a check. So, nice final move to finish the game. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.